And I read Z. Klaus Schwab's books, right? So I read
Z. Klaus Schwab.
Z. Klaus Schwab.
Z1 and
Z.
Z1.
Schwab.
Dude.
That's not real.
It turns out people
He's
ask
dressed like a Sith.
I,
He looks like Darth Vader. He looks like what Anakin was wearing when he turns into Darth
I
Vader.
think they're just. It is literally. There's some weird university in Europe that gave him a doctorate, and that instead of the normal doctorate robes, that's what they wear.
So it's like,
Wow.
he's like a Sith.
It's academic regalia in like some Sith university of Lithuania or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
So who is this guy? Tell us about Klaus Schwab.
So Klaus Schwab is the chairman of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum was his brainchild back in 1971. He comes up with this idea, the World Economic Forum. The idea is to bring big corporate leaders together with government leaders, with NGO leaders, with other movers and shakers, I guess, like Greta Thunberg, and get them to rub elbows in massive fancy ski resorts and these kind of future visionary kind of how are we going to shape future society meetings that for very many years were famously held in Davos. And so he wrote this series of books. His first book, I've only skimmed through it, I have it, is called Stakeholder Capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism is that we replace shareholder decision-making with stakeholder decision-making. So these are technocrats, experts, the experts, will tell us what the right environmental, social, and corporate governance policy, ESG policy, will be to run a company successfully in a sustainable and inclusive way. That's the language they use.
And a stakeholder, for instance.
Stakeholder is somebody who represents people who they claim hold a stake in what comes out. So if an oil company, for instance, creates pollution either directly or indirectly by selling its product, there are climate experts who are going to be representative stakeholders that are going to dictate what that oil company can do and can't do.
So the victims of corporate waste are the stakeholders in this situation?
No. Experts are experts who are appointed by other experts in a closed network become the stakeholders.
So it's taking it away from the shareholders, which are the people that have stock in the companies,
Yes.
being like, I want the company to do this, you said this,
Yes.
to a new unappointed electorate of experts
Yes.
controlling the economy from the top behind the
Yes.
scenes. Okay.
Correct. And I can explain how that works, but we're still talking about who Klaus Schwab is and what his ideas are, so I could tell you, because I brought him up to
let's
talk
do
about
this.
his book. And so it turns out he's got a number of books. Fourth Industrial Revolution is a book he wrote in 2016, maybe 15. I'd have to double check the date, but thereabouts. And he talks about how we're transitioning into an entirely new world. We're going through, because of high-tech digital stuff, we're going into an entirely new world. There's synthetic biology. There's all these new high-tech things. Everything is so complex. He says there's so much velocity to the changes. Moore's Law. He invokes a lot of sciencey sounding things. He says we're in a quantum state, which that's always really great. And I don't think he's talking just about quantum computers. He's like, it's quantum business or something like. And so it's like Deepak Chopra at that point, who is also works with the World Economic Forum.
Really?
Yes. And so anyway, the point I wanted to raise was in his book that he wrote in June or July of 2020 called COVID-19. Let me say this very clearly because it's a conspiracy theory. Klaus Schwab, who directs this gigantic future-facing World Economic Forum that has sought since 1971 to remake the world economy and all of its tools, and has brought together the biggest world leaders in governance, corporations, and institutions to help do so in a yearly meeting, plus having thousands of employees, or at least hundreds of employees worldwide. He wrote a book called, let me not stutter, COVID-19, The Great Reset. That's the title of the book.
When did that book come out?
In June or July of 2020. Seems quick, doesn't it?
Perhaps.
Like 4 months into the pandemic, which was a very narrow window of opportunity to remake our global economy. As he described
you
it.
read the book?
I did read that book. I live tweeted about half of it because I read that part in the back of the car.
How much of it directly talks specifically about COVID-19?
Almost all of it.
Wow.
Virtually all of it, and how it can be used as a representative problem that the scale of problems that we face. Everything he writes and says sounds to me virtually the same. He writes a lot of this kind of visionary pablum, and then all of a sudden he has this one weird paragraph in each of his books, because I've read 3 of them, and it's like, that's why we need global cooperation in the world government to usher us through these dangerous changes that we're having that are coming so fast. We were talking about this supply chain kind of universe. So he's dead wrong in this book. He's explaining at that point that what's going to happen is people are going to be so scared of pandemics that as we come out of 2021 or so, what we're going to face is a massive demand crisis. People won't be willing to engage in goods and services anymore. And so now we're going to have this problem where employers aren't going to be able to employ people at all because there's no demand for the products, because nobody wants to go back into a virus-ridden society, and they're all scared and they're all hiding in their basements like Joe Biden did before the election. And as it turns out, we have the exact opposite problem. We're trying to pay kids $20-something to flip burgers at McDonald's, and they won't do it. This is the UBI thing, right? So UBI is actually kind of in his whole program. So they're going to have a more inclusive economy. You give more people money, they're more included into the economy. They can participate in the economy. They have resources to participate. He actually talks about the inclusive economy in this regard. And so it actually creates exactly the opposite scenario that he's warning about. He's literally dead wrong. But this guy, for our technocratic experts, is the expert of the expert of the experts. That's really, he's the kingmaker among who gets to be these experts who are going to dictate everything. And as I was saying to Tim just a second ago, these guys have quite a track record of getting some pretty consequential shit wrong, as we've all seen over the last 3 years, as we say in the South. So Klaus's vision, if we're going to be as charitable to him as possible, is that the world has entered into a new phase because of high technology, computers, AI, automation and robots, synthetic biology, the capability apparently to unleash pandemics, which he ominously mentions in kind of weird ways throughout his books. Yeah, I mean, like lots of these geoengineering even, like he casually mentions in one of his books, The Great Narrative, the newest one, that maybe we'll just block out the sun to stop for a while to stop
Could a small nuclear war prevent global warming? Remember that one?
Right, I just saw that, yeah, that was 10 years ago. And, so they just casually flirt with these ideas. So he says, well, because of these changes that are coming to the world anyway, because of the rapid changes in technology, et cetera, what we need is people who are really informed about what these things mean to shepherd us through so that they don't become calamities, like, say, COVID-19. They become something that we shepherd and use to the benefit of all. And then it's all, how do we get there? Global cooperation, global governance. Who's going to be in charge of it? Well, my merry band of experts. We have climate experts, we have technology experts, we have AI experts. We have all these, like what's it named? Yuval Harari or whatever. We had a World Economic Forum video, 2019, 18, something like this. And he's talking about, we're going to hack humans. Like, they are a hackable system. We're going to figure out how to hack humans like we hack computers. They're basically just software.
But are they talking about the human mind or are they talking about the human body?
I think both.
And the muscle, it's the neurons in the muscle and the stomach. And
we would have to look up his exact argument. It's been a little bit since I've seen it. But
the human mind is actually remarkably easy to hack in a rudimentary sense. The majority of hacks, when they'll be like hackers broke into a computer, it's actually human manipulation.
That's right. That's exactly right. Which is why, for example, why are they making your kids at school fill out all these damn surveys all the time? Like literally survey after survey. What are they doing?
I didn't hear about this.
Oh God, this is under the brand of social and emotional learning. They're constantly trying to learn more about the children so they can do the social emotional learning interventions or whatever it is, which turned out to be Maoism, by the way. But they're also making them fill out these surveys. And so they're constantly like, how much money do your parents make? What are your views about this? How do you feel about the boobs that you're growing when you're a 12-year-old girl? Like, that's real. I've seen that. It's North Carolina. That's real. How do you feel about the changes to your body? You're growing pubic hair. How do you feel about that?
Jeez,
do people look at you? And so they're filling out these things. And the goal is to create unique profiles for every single individual in society, very much like what we heard about, whether real or not, from Cambridge Analytica, where they were using personality profiles and then injecting that into people's social media to influence their voting habits, influence political behavior, influence speech, influence thought, so that the thought never enters the mind of the reactionary. Influence buying habits. Did I say that one already?
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of ties between Cambridge and the World Economic Forum.
Of course there are. Yeah. And so this is the idea, is that you're actually going to, that's level one. Level two is if these fools get neural implants where we're literally hooking our brains to the internet, then you could directly hack. They're actually, I've seen this with my own eyes in Florida recently. There are schools, literally schools, as in real schools, are giving peer-to-peer text communication chat options for kids who are exploring gender identity, sexual identity, etc. And then it gets outsourced to the bot. But then there's also the fact that thing starts telling the person that's falling in love with this digital fabrication how it wants it to think.
Right.
That is how you get those emotional responses going, especially pleasure, love, which is a really weird thing to say, but it would happen. People will fall in love with their digital, just like in Japan, they're people marrying action figures. And if these things are hooked up to machine learning, they're going to learn how to program you. They're going to learn to play you like the most narcissistic, psychotic girlfriend, times 10. I don't think people realize the amount of data that these weirdos are collecting. They're collecting data that they, in fact, can't even analyze yet because the AI is not good enough to analyze it. But this is a story. I don't want to rat anybody out, but I have a friend, and we're pretty close, so we send funny, kind of personal stuff back and forth sometimes. And so she's got the Whoop, right? And we were talking about the Whoop before we hooked this thing up.
It's asking me for my pronouns.
Yeah, well, it would. Other. So it's here are the top 3 reasons you lost sleep in the last year. It chronicled them. And number 2, she thought this was hilarious. I was aghast. Number 2 is masturbating. So her Whoop app knew how often she's diddling herself. So in other words, it knows when she's emotionally engaging or pleasure engaging in one way or another, which means it's recording all kinds of crap about you at the level of your heart rate, your breathing, your body temperature, your sweat. It's recording stuff about that. So you're like, oh, wow, that's weird that it knows that. Yeah. And so it's also going to know when did your heart rate, et cetera, do whatever, and then you went and bought a $1,000 thing off Amazon. When did it do whatever, and then you went and had a rant on the internet. And it's going to be able to, this machine learning stuff will be able to figure out and correlate that data and be able to deliver to you messages that will make you feel or think or act the way it wants you to, whether that's to go buy another $1,000 thing, whether that's to just buy some little thing, whether that's to go, engage in some kind of political activity, whether that's to start yelling at somebody who's engaging in political activity. They can prime you for all of that. And if it's your digital waifu, I'll feel really really proud of you if you go yell at Tim Pool on the internet. They want you, as Tim very vividly described, looking like Karl Marx with his carbuncles and boils, never washing, stinking, laying on his side on his couch because his boy. This is real. Like, go read his letters. Real carbuncles and pestilential boils are so bad that he can't lay any other way.
Marx?
Yeah, Karl Marx was not a physically healthy dude. This is all real. I'm not making this crap up. And stinking like tobacco and sweat and grime and alcohol that he spilled on himself and whatever else. They want you like that, attracting no mate, making no babies, diddling yourself constantly to your digital avatar that's not even real, like that you're not even going to connect. That's what the goal. And so then your environmental score goes up because you never leave your apartment, so you're not using, you are giving up the carbon, and your social score goes up because you're not out causing social unrest and you're only interacting with digital things. And then I don't know about your governance score, but as long as you follow all the rules, that's going to stay high. And so that the ESG thing that we're talking about is a corporate social credit score that the Klaus Schwab and the other gigantic banks are using to tool everybody around. Why is woke happening? Because ESG. The S is social, which is short for social justice. Activism. That's why. All of that's going to get transferred eventually if they get their way through digital IDs and central bank digital currencies that they have complete control of. Like we just saw how scary that is, not just in Canada, but now we're seeing things that they can shut off in Russia. We're seeing that they can turn off your access to everyday life. What they're going to do is shuttle into individual social credit scores rooted again in the same ESG, a model like China, but taken a bit further. And the goal is absolute social control. Nobody that they don't want to make babies is making babies. They'll make only the number of babies they want when they want them and however many they want them. They'll all be groomed to be elites. Because the problem that Klaus Schwab lays out in these books is that with automation and AI and all of this high-tech stuff that's coming, we're going to have what he calls a creative class that's going to be all the people who do work that the robots and the AI don't do. And then you have, he doesn't ever, I don't know if he explicitly uses this term, but I've seen this term applied. You have a vast useless class. And the goal for them is to figure out how do you manage the useless class so they don't have crisis of meaning, so they don't become unmanageable, so they don't realize that their life has been rendered, meaningless and empty, so they don't become full of social unrest, et cetera, et cetera.